So this is going to be a Yuri's Revenge training for range. And this is a proof that the longer range usually gets the first hit when they're going toward each other. So they both are attacking each other. And let's see who hits first. See, the Mirage Tank got the first hit. So that was the proof right there. The only time that the Mirage Tank wouldn't get the first hit is if... So this is the range of tanks' attack damage. So you see, about 5 is the average, the mode average. And better than 5 is a good range. Worse than 5 is a bad range. And you can see Chrono Miner has 0. Slave Miner has 5.5. Prism Tank has one of the best ranges of tanks. Mirage Tanks have 7, which is a fantastic. Rhino Tank has 5.57, which is good. So anything better than 5 is good. And Tesla Tank actually has a range of 4, which is a little bit bad. That's one of the disadvantages. And German Tank Destroyer actually has an average range, same as Grizzly Tank and Lasher Tank. And Robot, Lasher, Flak, Grizzly all have an average range of 5, which is okay. And Terror Drone, this is actually a melee range. It's not really a ranged firing unit. So this is actually a melee range. It's about 1.5 for melee range. And Terror Drone has 1.83. Chrono Miner doesn't attack, so has a range of 0. Cost, damage, attack speed, and other statistics about tanks is in a different training video. This focuses mainly on range advantages. In Red Alert 2 and Yuri's Revenge, you usually don't get too outranged to make a super big deal about this. But just know a couple situations where you had to worry about the range. If Yuri has a whole bunch of Magnetrons, using a Prism Tank with its long 10 range would be a good counter to it. Another common situation would be in Allied versus Allied. If one player gets too many Prism Tanks, they're going to have such range that it's going to be actually hard just to penetrate an area just to get to the other Prism Tanks. So you're actually going to have to use Rocketeers and airplanes to actually try to clean it up, or other Prism Tanks of your own in Allied versus Allied. And another situation would be in Navy. If you're playing a map that has a lot of land and a lot of Navy, like Isle of War, you had to worry about the aircraft carriers and Dreadnought's range, which is very high, and that's the whole point of making Navy on a land and sea map. And you need actually Navy to combat that. So we'll go through this one real quick. GI has a range of 5, and that's deployed. Guardian GI has a range of 4, that's undeployed. Attack Dog 1.5, that's a melee range. Flag Trooper, Conscript. Conscript actually has less than a GI. That's the reason why you always notice that when sandbag GIs come up, conscripts always have a range disadvantage against them. Tesla Trooper actually has a really bad range of 3, actually surprisingly, but it's actually kind of like a tank destroyer if you could actually get the hits off on a tank. Desolator has a good range of 6. That's better than some tanks like Grizzlies. Engineer 1.8, that's a melee. Usually like 1.3 to 1.8 is melee. Side Commander, and these are actually hero units, so this is actually kind of throwing it off a little bit. Boris and Tanya have good range. Boris has a little bit more, but Tanya actually could like 1 or 2 shot him really quick. Yuri Prime has a good range. Crazy Ivan, that's a melee range. And I don't have to go through every unit in the game, but this will just give you an idea. Corner Legionnaire 5, which is okay. Chrono Commander 6, that's a special unit. Mastermind has 6, which is actually 1 less than a Mirage Tank. That's the reason why Mirage Tanks have a range advantage on them. Sniper actually has one of the best infantry, or the best infantry ranges in the game. Magnetron has really good range. Chaos Drone has a really bad range of 3. And Terrorist is a melee range, you have to go right up to them. And Brute has 1.4 is another melee range similar to a dog. It's not super important to memorize this entirely, but just be familiar with it to some extent. You could learn most of this just from playing. And one thing you need to know is sometimes you could stay in a range where you could hit your opponent's units if you have range advantage and they can't hit you. It's kind of called kiting, but it's called something different in different games. And sometimes Rhino Tanks could do it with Grizzly Tanks if the Grizzly Tank player plays like kind of scared, and they could use a range advantage even though they barely have a really small range advantage of 5 to 5.75. And you're going to see the area between the red lines later in this video where it's going to explain what I just talked about. So here we're going to compare Prism Tank versus Mirage Tank's range. And the radius of the yellow is the Prism tanks, and the radius of the green is the Mirage tank's range. And you see the Prism tank actually has one of the longest ranges in the game. And the Mirage tank actually has much better than average range. Range of 7 for Mirage and a range of 10 for the Prism tank. There's a space where the Prism could hit the Mirage, and the Mirage cannot hit the Prism. And the same thing with Rhino tanks, but the space would be even larger for a Rhino tank. And also the splash damage is another story of the Prism tank. So those two red lines represent the area that the Prism could hit the Mirage, but the Mirage can't hit the Prism if the Mirage tank went inside those areas. Now the pink radius represents the Rhino tanks, which is smaller than the greens, which is the Mirage. They have a range of 5.75. And you see, the Prism tank has them way outranged. But of course there's other factors in range in the game, but we're going to focus on range for this video. Rhinos have a little bit more range than a Grizzly tank, but not much more. Now the Rhino tank is in the blue, the Tesla tank is in the red, and the good range of the Mirage tank is in the green. Now I'm going to go to the edge of the range of the Mirage tank and try to force fire on the Mirage. And you can see the Rhino tank can hit the Mirage, but the Mirage can hit the Rhino tank. That shows a range advantage, and it shows a place in between those red lines in practice.